One of the special creations that we have in Genesis 1 is humankind. And so I want to look at the creation of humankind in Genesis 1. Then God said, "Let us make humankind in our image, after our likeness, so they may rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, over the cattle, over all the earth, and over all the creatures that move on the earth." God created humankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. So in Genesis 1, both male and female are said to be created at exactly the same time. Both male and female are said to be in the image of God. But just looking at those two verses, I'm sure there are a number of questions that come to your mind. One of the first being, why is God plural? Let us make humankind in our image is the way it opens. Um, there are several explanations that have been given for this, and obviously I'll let you decide what you feel on this. The first is that some feel this is the first reference that we have to some sort of Trinitarian connection, because after all, Christians do have a belief in the Trinity of God, a God that is three and one at the same time, and that the "let us" is a reference to some sort of Trinitarian comment. I am a big fan of the Trinity. I want to get that out there. I'm pro-Trinity. I don't think that necessarily is what we see going on in this, partly because I think there's a more simpler, a much simpler explanation for that. Some suggest the second option is that God is speaking to the divine council, that this is the God talking to the angels and all those around the subcontractors, I guess, of creation who are going to get working on this. It's possible. None of them have been introduced yet, but we do see that not long from now, Genesis 3, we do have some divine beings at work. So that's a possible interpretation of that. Implication being that the divine council, the angels, etc., are in God's image as well. For me personally, the third explanation that makes the most sense, probably because it is the simplest, that what we have going on here is just a royal we. It is very common, even today, for monarchs, for royalty to refer to themselves in the plural. So the Queen of England is we whenever she speaks about herself. I think the idea is that they embody the nation. Um, you see a president do it, right? My fellow Americans, starting open with a plural like that. That's sort of I guess, a democratic royal we that you get there. But it's not uncommon for that to happen. And I think it best explains what's going on in the story. It's a very royal picture of God, as I said, so it shouldn't surprise us that God is speaking about the divine in royal ways. Um, the relationship between male and female is interesting in Genesis 1 because there is no difference there. There's no subjugation. Neither is placed in charge of the other. There, it is very much a picture of equality. Both, it seems, required to be in the image of God. Both are in the image of God. What does it mean to be in God's image? Again, a lot of explanations given for this. I think there are some interesting ones. Some say that our capacity for love is what makes us God's image. I'm not really convinced by that because I think I've known some better dogs than people. I think some dogs get unconditional love better than humans do, so I don't know that that's where we want to go on that. Some say our intellect, our reason is a possibility. Um, I don't know fully what it is to be in the image of God, but I do know that in some ways it makes humanity distinct. I mean, for whatever it entails, humanity is the only part of creation that is said to be in the image of God, and it is also humanity that is entrusted with the dominion of the earth as a result of that. God gives dominion to human beings. Now, dominion is very much a royal picture. And I think it's important to know what the Bible means by dominion versus what we mean by dominion. Very often, I think this passage has been abused in interpreting dominion as we get to be kings so we can do what we want. But very soon in the biblical text, you see that kings are judged by the way in which they rule. And the king that uses the kingship for self, the king that does everything that the king can to make it better for the king, that is a bad king. The king that does whatever that king can to make it better for the people, better for God, better to enact God's instruction in the world, that's a king that's considered a good king. So dominion that we see, stewardship that we see here, is to remember that we have been entrusted with this to use humanity, to care for humanity, to rule over humanity, but to rule over humanity the way God rules over the earth. In other words, God rules over the earth in love, and we'll see eventually so much love, so strong, so much, willing to give himself for it. Humanity has to love the earth in that way as well. That's the model that we've given of kingship for God, a selfless kingship, not a selfish kingship. So that's a sense of dominion, I think, that we get there in Genesis 1. I think that challenges Christians to be just champions for environmentalism, champions for responsible stewardship, champions for concern for the earth, to guard and to protect it.